Ask and you shall receive. Today's video is going to talk about feminism, and it's going to come to you in 3 parts, well, all in the same video. What is feminism? Why talk about feminism? And why I don't call myself a feminist. What is feminism? As many of you may know, the common answer to this question is something along the lines of, feminism is just about wanting gender equality. And quite frankly, I think this definition is simplistic and ridiculous in its simplicity. You might as well say that Christianity is just about loving each other. Oh, do you believe in forgiveness? Well, congratulations, you're a Christian. Communism is the radical belief that workers are people too. Oh, you believe that workers are people too? Well, congratulations, you're a communist. So what's the actual problem with this definition? Well, it's the same problem that would arise if Christianity were simply defined as believing in forgiveness, or if communism were simply defined as the radical idea that workers are people too. It just does not do its job as a label, or as a definition, take your pick, to distinguish your group from anyone else, and it kind of loses its power, as it were. And this is one of those rare times where I would actually agree with feminist writer Jessica Valenti when she writes, when everyone is a feminist, is anyone? Does it really mean anything to say, well, feminism means this, and, oh, by the way, that includes everyone? Like, that doesn't do anything. And this gets into the problem of labels, or the paradox of labels, I forget which one. But essentially what this says is, there has to be a certain level of specificity for the label that your group adopts. You can't go too broad, you can't go too narrow. If you go too broad, and basically include everyone, then it really doesn't distinguish your group from anyone else, and it doesn't really describe you that well. But, on the other hand, if you go too narrow, then your label is gonna, well, its meaning is not gonna be well known. It's gonna be way too specific, and no one will know what you're talking about.
We're here to bring you back to the one true faith, the Western branch of American Reformed Presbyterianism.
But there's a more fundamental problem with this simple definition of feminism, and that is just the fact that it's not accurate in practice. I'll give you an example. I desire gender equality, but in practice, I am not accepted by feminist communities. Well, why is that? Well, it's pretty much the same reason why, even though I believe in forgiveness and being nice to people, I'm not accepted into Christian communities, at least not as a Christian, and so I don't call myself a Christian. And the reason is because Christianity and feminism have deeper underlying ideologies that I don't agree with. For Christianity, it's, well, a lot of stuff that's already on my channel, I'm sure you all know that. And for feminism, these ideologies include things like patriarchy, rape culture, male entitlement, toxic masculinity, and just the idea that men are the oppressor class and women are the oppressed. And, as I said, maybe the definition of feminism you want is just the desire for gender equality, but I'm telling you, in practice, that is not an accurate definition. In fact, a woman by the name of Christina Hoff Sommers experienced the same type of rejection when she criticized feminist ideologies. She still calls herself a feminist, but she's been largely rejected by modern feminists, modern feminist communities, because she was critical, and still is critical, of these deeper ideological tenets. And this all started when she published her book called Who Stole Feminism?
In the early 90s, I was a feminist academic in good standing. I was invited to feminist conferences. I was sought after as someone to review papers for feminist journal. My philosophy classes at Clark were often cross-listed with women's studies. That all changed rather abruptly around 1994 when I published my book, my first book, Who Stole Feminism? Now, the book was strongly feminist. However, I rejected the idea that American women are an oppressed class. I described feminism as a great American success story, that women were flourishing in so many ways that it was no longer possible to say who was better off. It was a complicated mix. I didn't say women didn't have problems, but so did men. And to speak of American society as a patriarchy or to call American women second-class citizens seems to me to be well, it seems to me to be absurd. When the book was first published, there were prominent feminists who wrote me fan letters and liked it. Erica Jong, Nadine Strawson, president of the ACLU. But for the most part, I was subjected to a colorful array of epithets for my heresy. I was excommunicated from the religion of feminism. Many feminist leaders remain convinced that American society is a patriarchal, oppressive system, and they did not appreciate my pleas for moderation. Some called me a backlasher, traitor to my gender, anti-woman. One anger critic even referred to Margaret Thatcher and Christina Hoff Sommers, those two female impersonators.
Now, to be fair, there are several different schools of feminism, each with their own take on these ideological commitments. Some even go so far as to dispense with them entirely, like the one that Christina Hoff Sommers adheres to. So it really isn't fair to talk about feminism as some homogeneous mass. Although, in my conversations with feminists, it does seem like they want to categorize it that way. They don't seem very willing to accept that there are different schools of feminism. They say, well, I've got my feminism and anything else just isn't feminism at all. Christians, on the other hand, when I talk to them, they seem a lot more willing and able to acknowledge other schools, essentially. They'll say, yes, I am this kind of Christian, I'm a Calvinist or a Lutheran or something, I believe this about what it says in the Bible. Those people over there, yeah, they're also Christians, they just have a different interpretation, and that's fine. I'm not going to be like, well, Christianity means this, and all you other people are wrong. It's like, you know, so in that sense, I think Christians, in my experience anyway, are a lot more accepting of the fact that there are other schools, whereas most of the feminists I've talked to have basically said, well, yeah, there's what I think, and that's feminism, and nothing else is. So I can understand why people talk about feminism as some homogeneous mass. But going beyond the separate schools of feminism, it really does seem to me that there are as many types of feminist as there are individual feminists. And I've said a similar thing about Christianity in the past. It seems to me that there are just about as many versions of Christianity as there are individual Christians, so it really does depend who you talk to. Depending who you talk to, patriarchy can simply mean traditional gender roles that suck for everyone, fair enough, but it can also mean up to and including a male conspiracy of oppression which uses gender roles, pornography, and the gender binary to strictly define femininity in order to control women for the express benefit of men, which I think is downright insane. I did paraphrase that, but that's essentially what it goes up to. So, let's return to the original question. What is feminism? Not a very satisfying answer, but this is the only one that seems to make sense, which is, feminism is a broad spectrum of beliefs that are related to the same basic ideas. Kind of like Christianity is a broad spectrum of different beliefs related to the same basic, shared idea, which is those present in the Bible. And you could honestly make this kind of definition of many different ideologies, whether it's feminism, Christianity, communism, pretty much any different ideology. It is a spectrum related to similar kind of unifying beliefs. And as with any spectrum, a large part of it is reasonable and okay and probably not that loud, probably not that powerful. If anything, you muse about it, you make, YouTube videos on the philosophy of God and such. But when you get over to the far end, that's where I start to have a problem, because these people are not only crazy, but they often have a lot of power, because they are that driven.
Sir, I'm afraid you've gone mad with power.
Of course I have. You ever tried going mad without power? It's boring. No one listens to you.
Why talk about feminism? I think the answer is fairly self-explanatory based on how I ended the previous section. Very simply put, you've got a bunch of crazy people who are also a bunch of really powerful people. Not all of them, not the whole spectrum, but that end of the spectrum, you better watch out. And for Christians, of course, it's things like passing all these abortion bans, trying to get creationism into schools, this and that. I'm sure everyone knows that who watches this channel. And for feminism, it's things like opposing legal paternal surrender, or passing affirmative consent laws. I wrote about that on my blog. I hope to make that into a video. Using Title IX as a quota system rather than a non-discrimination thing. Teaching men that they're diseased, essentially, that there's something wrong with them that's been instilled by our culture, and colleges are all over this shit, trying to make sure that men aren't pieces of shit when they come in. Women are fine, though. So that's why I think it's important to talk about these kinds of things that these kinds of feminists say. Why don't I call myself a feminist? Once again, I think this is fairly self-explanatory based on what I've already said. Essentially, it is the deeper ideological commitments that I disagree with, and once you dispense with those, I hardly think what you're left at could be rightly called feminism. Now, there are feminists like Christina Hoff Sommers, a self-proclaimed freedom feminist, and also Wendy McElroy, a individualist feminist, who have argued and continue to argue against these religious kind of sounding ideological commitments. and they each would make the case that, well, they still think that the feminist label is still useful. Christina Hoff Sommers has a video explaining why, despite all of those disagreements she has with the ideology, she still thinks it's appropriate to call herself a feminist. I would disagree for me, but okay, at this point you're just arguing semantics. So, you know, that and everything else I've said in the video kind of goes to explaining this third point, why I don't call myself a feminist. That's pretty much all I have to say for the introduction to, or the summary of, feminism as I see it, kind of setting the tone for what I might talk about in the future. And check the low bar for some links that I might throw down there just to kind of help clarify my position. And hope you guys enjoyed it.